See, okay.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Why was this easier when it was just you and I, Agnes?
No pressure.
Always works that way, Sean.
It's performance anxiety.
I was thinking the same thing when we started our conversation. It was a lot easier with just the two of us. So we'll see how this goes.
Okay. Here we go. Let's see here.
Did the dog eat it?
We're close.
The
Ta-da!
bird ate it. All right. Let's see. Is it okay if I just share it this way as opposed to doing the slide presentation?
I don't know about anyone else, but on my system has a very small monitor. Is it easy for you to do the slide or easier to do it this way? What's easiest for you?
Let me, hold on one sec.
Oh, that looks good.
Yeah, that looks fine. Oops.
Okay, so are you seeing just the big screen?
Well, we're
No.
actually seeing the next slide and the first slide. We're seeing the Village Center Master Plan and then the next slide.
Okay, let's see then. Duplicate. There we go. Is that a little bit better then? It's just one big slide?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so my first question for you is, what prompted the city to consider adding 7 village centers to its 2017 general plan land use transportation element, affectionately known as the LOOT?
Well, the purpose of actually adding the village centers throughout the city was to look at redeveloping underutilized shopping centers that are located at key intersections. And you'll notice that when I show you the map. The intent is to provide a walkable center for surrounding neighborhoods and to discourage people from using automobiles and to improve the streetscape and walkability of the surrounding neighborhoods. At the time when it went to council, the maximum density that was determined for the village centers was a maximum of 18 dwelling units per acre, and that's an average. And then we wanted to retain commercial square footage. That way it provides services for the surrounding neighborhood with a minimum of 10% of the lot area up to 25% of the lot area. And there was concerns about compatibility with the surrounding single family neighborhoods around these shopping centers. And so the heights that were put in place was 3 to 4 stories, typically with 3 stories towards the back adjacent to the single family or townhouses, and then 4 stories towards the street frontages. And then also as a component of the village center master plan or village centers in the general plan was to have an extensive public input process with the understanding that each village center and surrounding neighborhoods have slightly different needs and that each center would go through its own public input process. And then this is a map of the village centers that we, as Agnes said, we have 7 village centers and they start down at the southern end of Sunnyvale, mainly along Fremont. So we have Village Center 1, which is Fremont Avenue and Mary Avenue, and that includes all 4 corners. And then we have Village Center 2, which is Fremont Avenue and Sunnyvale Saratoga Road. And that includes Fremont Corner Shopping Center with the 24-hour fitness. And then also the smaller shopping center across the street from the high school with the gas station and former Thai restaurant, which I used to like. Village Center 3 is on Old San Francisco Road and Wolf Road. And that includes a large shopping center that used to have a grocery store at some point. It now has the gym located there. And then the other 2 smaller commercial shopping centers on the opposite corners. Village Center 4 is Matilda and Maud. That village center includes two areas. One is the Lucky Shopping Center, which currently is pretty much leased out and seems to function pretty well and is pretty walkable along Matilda. And then the smaller shopping center along Maud, that one's a little bit more challenging. It's across from the school, and the lot depths are a little bit more narrow. So redevelopment of that area is a little bit more challenging. Village Center 5 is located over by the former AMD site on Duane. And it's mainly restaurants and some grocery stores. And then we have Village Center 6, which is the existing, excuse me, sorry, I got a frog in my throat. The existing Village Center on Tasman and Fair Oaks, which is already built, but we just wanted to designate it as a village center and adjust the design guidelines based on the special development permit that allowed that development to occur. And then Village Center 7, which is across the street, and is currently basically warehouse businesses on the opposite side of Fair Oaks. And that includes the 7 village centers throughout the city. And then I'll go ahead and show a few slides of some examples of village centers. They range in density, but just to kind of give you an idea, basically on how they activate the street frontage, make it more pedestrian friendly, and keep the commercial on the ground floor with residential above. So this is a village center in Campbell. It is on, I want to say, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. It's near Hamilton and downtown Campbell. So what they've done is they have multifamily above with commercial below. If you go inside this driveway, I believe there's a senior housing development on the interior. So it keeps the street frontage active with a bunch of different retail, restaurant uses and other commercial uses. This is kind of a larger, more denser example. This one's in Mountain View on San Antonio Road. This does have some of the elements that we were looking for in the village centers, which includes the public gathering places like a park, plaza for outdoor seating or dining, and just kind of active areas for the nearby neighbors to use. And this is another example from the city of San Mateo out at Bay Meadows, which is the former racetrack. This is a 4-story product, again, with outdoor plaza areas, ground floor retail, and residential above. And this is the last one that we have an example of, and this is a more of a lower scale. It's in San Diego. And again, this is like a 2-story to 3-story residential development with ground floor retail space along the pedestrian level on both frontages at the street corner. And what these intend to do is basically to kind of anchor the street corner. It helps to slow traffic. And then again, to get people out of their cars and just walk around and use the commercial spaces that are on the ground floor.
So the next question that I have is you talked about where they're located. You've talked about some of the components in regard to commercial versus residential. But how do you see these village centers will enhance the existing neighborhood specifically?
I think with the land use and transportation element update, we included several features of the village centers, and I'll kind of highlight, there's a lot of bullet points here, but the intent is to provide supportive services for the existing residential neighborhoods, get people out of their cars, have activated areas by allowing mixed use with residential, trying to get regular transit service. So we'd have to coordinate with VTA, Valley Transit Authority to look at getting regular bus stops and more frequent bus stops. Reduce the need for parking, again, just getting people out of the cars in the neighborhood, and also unique design guidelines to address form. Design was kind of an important issue when we adopted the village centers. Each village center is surrounded by a slightly different neighborhood. And so there were concerns about just how these village centers would transition into the existing neighborhoods. And then lastly was to include public gathering places like plazas, coffee shops, community gardens. I don't know if taverns are necessary, but it's nice to have a local one occasionally. But again, it's just to provide a place for the neighborhood to gather and get kind of common services that would be expected in a normal shopping center. A lot of these shopping centers have a lot of vacant space and they're kind of underutilized. And that was also an intent of adopting the village center concept.
So the photos that you showed us of village centers in various cities look very different. Can you speak to what Sunnyvale's village centers will look like, specifically like the design concept for them?
Sure. So when the village center concept was adopted, there was concern about density and compatibility with the adjacent neighborhoods. So what they ended up adopting as part of the land use and transportation element was a maximum density of 18 units per acre average, which is over the entire site. So in some cases, because we want to maintain commercial square footage, you might have the back end of a site. If it's a large site, the average density might be slightly higher because it's spread out over the entire site. But ideally, it'd be the commercial up towards the street frontage with the residential kind of tucked in the back. And if it's 3 to 4 stories, it would step down to the residential in the back. Ideally with the 4 stories towards the front of the street. And with the guidelines, we just want to be sensitive to the residential neighborhoods. So there's 2 components to the Village Center Master Plan concept. One is the creation of objective design guidelines. So that means there'll be less subjectivity to them and there'll be more clear cut as far as what's expected in design. And then also the creation of development standards in the zoning code. So that would establish heights, daylight plane, setbacks, parking standards, kind of similar to what they did for the El Camino Real Precise or specific plan.
So the way that you describe the buildings with the 3 to 4 stories and gradually going up or going down towards the neighbors, that is also like the El Camino plan, correct? So that's a similar idea with the building structures? Okay.
Yeah, it might be a similar idea that we may end up using. So in the specific plan for El Camino, what they did is they used a daylight plane concept for the single story residential that abuts the commercial corridor along El Camino. And that may be a similar concept that we adopt as part of the village centers to kind of address height and to make them kind of step down.
Okay. So if I was a developer and I wanted to, say, build a village center in Sunnyvale, what's the process for me to do that?
The typical process for assuming the village center master plan gets adopted, and we have our development standards, we always encourage applicants to do a preliminary application or a preliminary review. It's kind of a conceptual plan set and we route it around to the different departments, and that's to get initial comments on the project, just to make sure there aren't any big issues, setback issues, that type of thing. Once they get their comments back, then they'll get their plans together for the formal submittal. So that'll include the architectural plans, civil drawings, maps if they're doing for sale units. And usually the permit types for those types of uses will either be what we call a use permit, And that's if it has a office designation. So like the corner of Fremont and Murray where the dentist offices are, that redevelopment actually has an office designation. So it is going through a use permit process. A lot of the other ones will go through what's called a special development permit process. And often they'll include some type of tentative map for subdivision. So either condominium or townhouse development. When they submit their formal plans, it'll go through city review, which we call the project review committee. And that includes representatives from building, fire, hazardous materials, public works, traffic, planning. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. I think that's most everybody. So they'll review the project proposal against the general plan requirements and then each own department's requirements within the Sunnyvale Municipal Code. Once we determine that the project is near complete or pretty close to being complete and meeting the standards, then we begin the community outreach process. So first there would be a community outreach meeting. So we'll notify residents usually within 1,000 or 2,000 feet of the subject site. And then after the community outreach meeting, we'll have a planning commission study session. Those are both opportunities for the public to provide comments, for the commission to hear, and for staff to hear. At the community outreach meeting, we will take notes and pass that information along to the planning commission study session. Often there'll be some minor tweaks to the plan set. So the applicant will make some revisions and resubmit, and it'll go back to the city review process, which will be another 30 days. And then once things are complete, we'll get it ready for public hearing. And generally it would just stop at the planning commission hearing with the use permit, special development permit, or a tentative map. And after adoption of the Village Center Master Plan, what we'd also apply to these projects would be the applicable development standards that we have developed for the zoning code for the Village Center Master Plan, and then also the objective design guidelines.
So it sounds like there's a lot of different moving parts in this process. What's the average time it would take to start from the application submittal on down to the guidelines, the objective design guidelines, roughly?
You mean just for the Village Center Master Plan process?
No,
Good.
if I want to go in and I want to build on one of these pieces of land. So I'm a developer and I want to build there, and this is a process that I would have to follow. Roughly how long would it take on average from the time that I submitted my application on through to when I could break ground, just roughly?
Roughly, I would say about a year, 10 months to 12 months. So usually it'll take about 4 to 6 months to get through the planning process, depending on the completeness of the plan set. And then you have to go through building permit plan check. Once you get through that, then you can go ahead and start breaking ground.
So with our current housing shortage, is there anything in the works to slow this process down or speed this process up some, do you think?
We're doing the best we can to keep it moving along. There is some urgency to get these objective design guidelines in place and also development standards in the zoning code. And that's partly due to some state laws that were adopted recently back in 2020, that went into effect in 2021, I believe. So there is urgency to get this plan in place to help guide development at these village centers. We did do an interim fix just to kind of hold us over until this plan gets adopted, which basically what we've done is we use the R3 residential R3 standards for any kind of residential development in the village centers that use the state density bonus to get additional housing. So that will apply heights, setbacks, building separations, and those types of requirements. And that was our interim fix until we get this plan in place.
Okay. So I have saved the longest question that I have for my last question.
Okay.
So here it is. So when we talk about housing density, and it's usually described as units per acre, in the case of the village centers with 18 units per acre being the average, how will the minimum and maximum density of these village centers be determined? And then lastly, can you give us a description of what a build of 18 units per acre would look like versus a build of 30 units per acre? Now I can see you grimacing, so that might be a little hard to answer, but give it your best shot.
Okay. So let me just kind of start high level, and this is kind of the issue that we run into, partly because when we adopted the Village Center Master Plan concept in the general plan, we didn't have the state law that was adopted, and it kind of wasn't on the books at the point when we adopted it back in 2017. There was concern about density adjacent to these single family residential neighborhoods. So that's why the density was set at the 18 dwelling units per acre. The challenge with the 18 dwelling units per acre and then trying to maintain commercial is that the 18 dwelling units per acre often it's a lower density and is typically the product type that you would see as a townhouse. In order to get, I think, the concept that we were thinking of with the Village Center Master Plan, which is more like some underground parking, a podium, which is kind of the first story that's concrete with commercial below and then residential flats above. That usually has to be at a higher density at, about 30 units per acre. And so if you've been kind of keeping up on some of the village center sites, like the one at Mary and Fremont, and then the other one at Sunnyvale, Saratoga and Fremont, the housing product types for both of those have been townhouse unit types. And they've one has maintained kind of the bare minimum of the commercial required, which is around the 10%. And then the other one on Mary and Fremont, because it's office zoned, has, I think, kept around 30,000 square feet of medical office, which is more than the 10%. I think it's around 15 or 18% of the site area. And if you don't mind if I go back, Agnes, to kind of give you
No, that'd be great.
an image. So I would say this San Mateo example is probably around 30 units per acre. The Mountain View one is probably around 40, 45 units per acre. And this one in Campbell is probably around 26 to 30 units per acre, to kind of give you an idea.
So there's one village center that's very close to where I live, which is smaller acreage than some of them. How are we going to decide what, I mean, I know we've got to do the commercial and the residential percentages. Is that how we would decide how to build out those village centers? Because you have to have 20% of whatever acres they are. So that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah, so ideally, because we don't want to lose our tax base, it's kind of an important aspect of our city budget.
Mhm.
So ideally, we would push developers to incorporate as much commercial square footage as they can. The 18 dwelling units per acre, has been set for all the village centers. The example that I gave for the one on Maud, I don't know if you can see my cursor moving here. So Lucky is on Matilda and Maud, but this one on Maud here, some of them aren't super conducive to redevelopment. And I would say this one on Mott across from the elementary school is one of those, just because the lots are really shallow.
Mhm.
So the housing element, which I'm sure Jenny or Ryan has brought to your group already, and I think you guys have commented on, did include a policy to look at increasing some of the densities for the village centers to like 30 units per acre.
Yeah.
So I think as we go through this process, we might look at some of the larger sites to incorporate some of that higher density, and then also look at kind of the surrounding community and population needs. So like Village Center 1 near Fremont and Mary, the combination of all those shopping centers is pretty large. So there's some development potential as long as it's done in a manner that's sensitive to the adjacent residential neighborhood, probably could take on a little bit more density. And I would say similarly to the old San Francisco Road development, that one shopping center is pretty large and can be broken up, I think, into a couple components. And the one advantage with that shopping center is the owner owns the gas station too. And that's kind of a tricky spot with some of these corners. This is the gas station's its own parcel and owned by somebody else. So that kind of takes away from anchoring the corner, so to speak. And then I think the other large shopping center that we have is out by Lakewood on Lawrence Expressway. So that's another large shopping center that could be redeveloped into something with a higher density probably.
Okay.
So those are all things we'll look at. And right now, would you like me to go through the timeline, Agnes, really quick?
Yeah, that would be great.
Actually, we have quite a few questions in chat, Agnes. So, you
Okay.
know,
Well, that was my last question. We're just going to show the timeline and then we'll get to the questions. Thanks,
Okay.
Leah.
All right, let's get to the timeline. So right now, we are currently doing interviews with developers, architects, and nonprofit developers to kind of understand their needs, what densities would make a project work to kind of get what we had anticipated the village centers would look like. So we're working through those through July and August. And then we'll go ahead and have some data from that and then go ahead and do some community outreach. Our plan is to break the community outreach up into 3 different meetings, kind of the south end of town, the middle end of town, and then the north end of Central Expressway. And so that's where we'll gather more community input and then try to put that information together to guide and develop what kind of development standards and kind of the importance of design guidelines for each village center. I think the idea with the master plan is that it'll have probably 7 chapters in it with different design guidelines for each village center. And there'll probably be some similarities between some of them, but some of them will have some specifics that'll need to be incorporated. And so ideally, we would like to get this wrapped up and done by the end of June or July of next year.
Okay, great.
That,
Okay, so we can start going over the questions now. And
okay.
what we are going to do is if we run out of time for Sean to answer the questions, what we'll do is we'll go through the chat and we will send them to Sean, and I will make sure that whoever asks the question gets Sean's answer to it, okay? So I guess we can just stop screen sharing and we can just.
Do you want me to read out the first question then?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the first question was in regards to the village centers, will they have pedestrian bicycle access from non-arterial side streets?
I think some of them will. It depends on the layout of the village center. So I think there's potential for the corner of Village Center 1 around Mary and Fremont. I think right now there is a connection behind the Chevron in the Westmore Village that we probably would like to enhance as part of the Village Center Master Plan. And then another example would be like the one out on Lawrence Expressway with the Hetch Hetchy right of way and bike path there. We'd like to add some connections there and get a better connection to the overpass that goes over Lawrence Expressway for bicycles and pedestrians.
Yeah, I would say that overpass actually needs to be updated.
Yeah.
Anyway, the second question is, will there be sufficient parking for the high density housing and retail so that cars won't be parking in nearby neighborhoods? They commented that in their neighborhood, the streets near the apartment complex are wall-to-wall cars along the street.
Yeah, parking is always going to be an issue, and we do have some limitations with state law as far as how much parking we can require with these developments. Ideally, with the mixed use development, there'll be some ability to share parking. So hopefully in the evenings when residents come home, there will be the ability to use some of the commercial parking to provide guest parking for some of the residents within the mixed use development. Now, if we're able to get a higher density use, then we could look at doing underground parking, which would provide a lot more parking and availability for the development.
I think
Right.
we're, and BPEC, we're actually trying to reduce some of the parking requirements because parking is one of the most expensive parts of it's acreage that you're not using basically for 90% of the day. So the next question
Wait,
was,
Leah, can I ask, can we go to Julia's because her hand is up? I'd like to let her ask. Yeah.
sure,
All three of her hands are up now.
okay.
Sorry, I was gonna wait till Leah, I just, but anyways, so the last slide that you showed with the timeline, so you're working on this, I guess, modified Village Center Master Plan, and that's not gonna finish until what, a year from now or right sometime. During this time, if developers come forward and want to, develop, what do you have to accept them at the current, with the current rules and regulations?
Unfortunately, we do. We try to work with the developers as much as we can, but with state housing law that's in place right now, our hands are pretty tied. So there's a lot of what we call concessions and waivers. So they're kind of like exceptions to zoning code requirements and standards that they can request as part of their development. Part of it has to do with how many affordable units they include in their development. And then the other part has to do with some state law regulations. The recent state law even limited how many parking spaces we can ask for residential. So it's kind of put us in a bind right now. And I think Agnes was going to ask me one other question, which I'll ask myself and answer for her, which was, we're also working on the citywide design guideline update to make them more objective. And so having them more objective is one way to kind of help guide development a little bit better. The way they're currently set up, quite a few of them are subjective, and that's what these developers will argue at this point. So we did get a grant to do an update to the citywide design guidelines, and we should have those updated by October of this year.
Excellent, good.
Okay, if I could return to the question. So one of them was respect to green codes. What are the requirements for green codes, gas versus electricity, green space, gray water use, etc.?
We do have our REACH code requirements. I don't know them off the top of my head, unfortunately.
I know all electric is the current requirement for the city.
Yeah.
The requirements, so.
Yeah, we do have the all electric. Gray water use, I don't think we have that really outside of Moffett Park. I think with the specific plan update, I think they're looking at different alternatives out in Moffett Park for the residential and office spaces to reuse some of the gray water for plumbing fixtures and stuff. And green space, the idea with the village centers is to have plazas and gathering spaces in these areas with the intent of them being owned by the property owner, maintained by the property owner, but having public access easements over them so that they can be used by the public.
And so one question was with respect to plans for 2 village center projects along Fremont seem to be well underway. Why do we, I guess the city of Sunnyvale, needs a VC master plan?
To try to get ahead and get a plan in place for the other remaining village center master plans. So we have some key ones, like the one on Duane over by AMD. That's an important village center, I think, because it provides a lot of services for all those residential units that we've put out there. And it's important to work with that landowner and keep as much commercial and other personal services in that shopping center. And the same with some of the other ones too, just to provide some of those needs so people can actually walk and get, groceries, pick up dry cleaning, that type of thing. Along with residential units, of course.
Right. And then one question was how much do the step down designs impact the number of housing units per acre, which ties into the another question of 18 units per acre. And then how much does it affect the tax base of the commercial area?
The step down, I think, can be accommodated by stepping up the structure towards the street frontages and just keeping it lower towards the single family residential, along with the adequate landscape buffer and landscape screening to maintain privacy. Some of the adjacent neighborhoods, like the one on Marion Fremont, have Eichlers on the back side. So of course the Eichlers are all glass walls on the back, and privacy is kind of a big issue. Some of the other areas don't have that situation, but I think it can be accommodated with the height as long as we push it towards the main streets. And the height on the corners will actually help kind of anchor the corners. And it also helps to kind of slow traffic too. If it's, a 2 or 3 story building, it doesn't really anchor the corner that well. So we're looking to get some height on the corners to act as an anchor and slow traffic down.
And so what the question was in regards to the number of units per acre, because there's a feeling, and this is more of a seems like that 18 units per acre as a maximum seems a little low.
It does, because it's not getting us what we had anticipated. So I think as we meet with the developers and architects, we'll get a better idea on kind of the dwelling units per acre that would actually get us, I think, the village center concepts that we were kind of anticipating for the corners. And that would be, like the podium construction with residential above and commercial at the grade level, along with some plazas and open space to be used by the neighborhood.
And does this type of plan affect the tax base of the commercial area, or is the goal to retain the tax base of the commercial area on the new construction?
I think because we allowed the 10 to 25% commercial space as part of the village center, we're allowing some flexibility on the tax base for that. Obviously, when the site redevelops with the residential units and the new commercial, the tax base will be increased when the site's reassessed. So that'll give us a little bit more money property tax wise. And then hopefully the commercial spaces will generate sales tax.
So I guess when an analysis is done on a project, you're assessing the overall tax base, that it would be more or neutral, but not less.
That is the
And-
plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, any speak now or oh,
Jim.
Julia again. Yay,
Oh, I
Julia.
thought I saw a hand up from Jim, but it disappeared. Okay.
Oh,
So, well, I don't know if Mike and Gail wants to go first.
okay, Mike, go for it.
All right, I was just going to ask maybe for a little more detail what Sean already talked about. I know when the loot was, the last loot was done where the village centers were included, and Livable Sunnyvale was very involved in that process. The notion was that there would be a lot of outreach, a lot of community involvement in developing these village centers. And what has happened is the SB 330 and some of the other state laws essentially prevent that from happening. I think the requirements, correct me if I'm wrong, whatever the requirements are, they have to be given to the developer up front. You can't trade back and forth, and there's a limit to the number of outreach meetings that can be required. And certainly we saw, a kind of a change in the way the developers were approaching one of the previous village centers when, essentially they didn't necessarily care what the public or the city had to say about it, because that's the state law. That's the intent of the state law, is to let these things go through without being delayed by city processes or the public. So it was a dramatic change, and they also require these objective standards, right? So
Correct.
Sean, could you comment a little bit more on on the impact that has had on this process? It's a very dramatic difference.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's had quite a big impact, partly on the attitude from the developers. Each developer is different. Some will work with us, some will just do what they want to do based on their product type. But it's basically given a bunch of guarantees to developers and taken a lot of control away from the city. And so, kind of to what Mike was alluding to, a developer can come in with what we call a preliminary application, and that allows them to lock in development fees, development standards, the zoning standards at the time. And that preliminary application is good for about 6 months until they submit a formal application. The law also limited the number of community outreach meetings or public hearings that we can have, and community outreach meetings is one of those types of meetings. So the max is 5 per project that we can have. And what was the other thing you asked there, Mike?
The objective standards.
Yes. Yeah, and the objective standards. So because a lot of our standards are subjective and they've worked for us for quite a while, it just leaves more wiggle room for the developers to argue the intent. And this has kind of come up in more places than just planning and our design guidelines. It's come up with our active transportation plan, because some of those are more goals and policies as opposed to being objective standards. So it's going to have kind of a snowball effect to where we have to kind of rethink and go back through and make things more objective so that it's clear of what our expectations are for these developments.
Okay, so I think we have enough time for Gail to ask hers and then Julia.
No, ask Julia first, because I just want to remind people about the August 11th meeting.
We got it.
We have it. It's there. Okay, Julia, you're on.
So Sean, when you said the current rules are 18 units per acre, you said, is it average or about? I forgot what the word you used was.
Yeah, it's an average. So you'll look at the entire site as a whole. So if you have an acre size site, you could do 18 units on it.
So you mean the entire site, meaning say Fremont and Mary, all four corners average?
It's each corner.
Each corner, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's
just-
too bad. But, okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julia. So Gail, you had an announcement, not a question, right?
She already
Well, I do
made
have
the
a question.
announcement.
Oh, you do have
have
a
a question.
question.
Yeah,
Okay.
my question is on Wolf and Old San Francisco.
Mhm.
It looks like that property across the street from the gym property is as narrow as the properties on Maud. And I'm wondering if that, again, is going to be an issue with developing.
I believe that will be an issue with developing, similar to the one that's kind of on the corner too, across the street. The narrowness of these lots really does impact the ability for them to redevelop. And I think that's something that we'll look at more as we kind of talk to the developers, the nonprofit groups and the community to kind of see what they want and are expecting in these village centers. And then also look and see what ones would make more sense to increase density. We're looking at, other concepts, potentially moving densities around. So like those narrow lots that have the 18 dwelling units per acre. Potentially we could look at the allowed density on those corners and maybe redistribute them within the village center to increase the density on the larger site and just let them be small neighborhood commercial strips and kind of remain as they are.
I that one on Maud, because I'm there every day walking my dog at Bishop. That strip is so narrow, and I think you're going to have the neighborhood up in arms. But if you created something like an old-fashioned strip mall where you had commercial on the bottom with some housing on top of it, that would work, but not 18.
Right.
We're okay, and then take it out, and if this is down the road, take it out of the village center and come up with something else that would still serve the purpose of having commercial and residential, but make it different so that it fits those acreages. And that would be the case on Maud and also on the old San Francisco and Wolf, because the properties are just too little. But go to town on the one on Lawrence and Lakewood is perfect. Absolutely perfect for one of these things. It's big, it's deep, and the neighborhood could certainly do with a lot more shopping because we're such a desert over here. But it absolutely has to include large retail, like a large grocery store, like 50,000 to 100,000 square feet.
Okay, so I want to.
That's my comment. Bye.
I want to make sure we're mindful of our time. So I want to thank you, Sean, for coming and for answering all of our questions. And you've gotten off the hook because there's no more in the chat.
But oil that share, it's very squeaky.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good night.
You too.
Just one last
right.
thing, Sean. Thank you again for your time and your commitment to Sunnyvale. If we can be of any help or a bridge, I think we like to see ourselves as a bridge between the city and the wider community. if we can be of help, because, I mean, we have our wants, but, you know, we want to work together, so we're here.
Okay, I'll keep you guys in the loop and rope you in when we need some to rally the troops together.
Beautiful. Thank
You
you.
have my
Alright.
email, so go for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
And next on our agenda, we're going to hear from Leah again, and Leah's going to help us understand. Congratulations to Leah. She is now the chair of BPAC, and she's going to help us understand the Sunnyvale Avenue undercrossing.
And the Mary Avenue, I have info on that since we had a.
Oh, you
special
have Mary
meeting.
too.
Yes, so I'm not going to show the whole presentation that was given to the BPAC. I'm just going to like give the salient points, because if you want to see the whole thing and hear the debates, it's recorded, it's on YouTube, it's out there. Okay, so let me share my screen. So there were two, for the first one, we're going to look at the Sunnyvale Avenue. There were two, and these are preliminary, I should stress, these are preliminary project plans. Let me share my screen. I didn't fully share. There were two options, and can you see my screen? Okay, I'm going to assume silence is assent. There were two options. One was the construction of an underpass for both vehicular traffic and for bicycles and pedestrians. And this is what it would have looked like in terms of how it appeared in terms of construction. So it would have basically had to go back from this residential area. I don't know what the cross street, I don't know if there's a cross street here, but around the location of the funeral home and the apartments on Sunnyvale Avenue, all the way to the Washington Avenue intersection. Okay, and so I'll go through I'll disregard the summary thing, but mostly you should know that the cost was about 225 to 275 million projected. It would involve closing the driveway, and then also would require a large emergency vehicle access change to the apartment complex here. And then also the businesses that are here on the Sunnyvale, on the Sunnyvale, lower part of Sunnyvale Avenue towards Washington would have been affected, since they would have lost that street to street connection there. Okay, so this was just a visual example of what a tunnel would have looked like. And so they're showing the bicycle circulation here. And then on the other side, what the bicycle circulation would have been. And then the ramps, the pedestrian ramps, which were kind of awkward for the underpass. And then what the opportunity, so this area would have been an open space opportunity if we had gone with the underpass. And then visually, this is what it would have looked like. Basically a Holland tunnel, picture a Holland tunnel going down Sunnyvale Avenue under to Washington. So the other option was the pedestrian bicycle only undercrossing. So that would have meant that vehicles that were traveling southbound on Sunnyvale Avenue would no longer be able to cross Caltrain at all. They would have been diverted to, if they wanted to cross the Caltrain tracks, they would have go to Matilda or to Fair Oaks. And similarly coming up from Sunnyvale Avenue the other direction, you could go on to Evelyn, but you would not be able to cross Caltrain to access Sunnyvale Avenue and Hendy. And this is the option that the BPAC decided to go with. The reason why, number one, it was half the cost of the proposed under tunnel vehicle and bicycle and pedestrian under tunnel. Secondly, we didn't like the fact that the tunnel ended at Washington Avenue. We thought that was an increased hazard for pedestrians crossing on Washington Avenue because you have vehicular traffic coming out from basically a hidden area. Also, the downtown merchants did not like the tunnel because of the reason that it removes the roadway contact for them. And they thought that it would have been, there's a big retail center on either side of the street in Sunnyvale. Mostly it's the backs of various Murphy Avenue businesses on one side, but on the other side, it's like the Gary Gold Eye Care Center. There's an auto service, there's restaurants, there's a Taekwondo place, I think, or a karate place. So there's stuff there. And so what it looks like is this. So we're still debating the actual final design in terms of like the ramps, because we thought this ramp issue was kind of awkward, but we didn't think that it would affect vehicular traffic as much. In fact, the largest amount of impact would be to the VTA bus service, which services the Caltrain station, because they would have to go to Matilda to overcross to get back to Sunnyvale. But it would make it easier for the large, and this is a well-used route for bicyclists going down to the Caltrain station back. Plus, it makes it a little more walkable in terms of the downtown district itself. It's more useful that way in terms of increasing the walkability and usefulness of the neighborhood. And this is the example of what a possible tunnel would look like. And then this will now go to the city council, of course, for their vote on what they feel the option should be. But this was also the staff recommendation that it be a bicycle pedestrian undercrossing only. And that's pretty much it for the Sunnyvale Avenue one. Before I go on to Mary, are there any questions about this in particular?
Could you, while Gail's, could you clarify again what happens with Evelyn?
Yes. So what happens is that, and they don't have a nice picture like they did for the bridge, so you could actually kind of see. But let me see if I can find a zoom up here. Let me zoom this up here. I can. Oops, sorry. Let me move this over so you can see better. So what happens with respect to Evelyn is that vehicles going on Evelyn will be able, of course, to continue on Evelyn. Okay, so traffic coming to Sunnyvale Avenue would be able to turn right or left on Evelyn. There would just be no access to the Caltrain overcrossing. Same thing with vehicles heading south on Sunnyvale Avenue. They could turn right or left on Hendy, but they would not be able to access the undercrossing at all. We strictly pedestrians and cyclists. We'd still need the easement for the driveway reconstruction for emergency vehicles to access the back area of Via del Sol. But in terms of the overall impact to the neighborhood and the construction costs and so forth, and most importantly, the downtown businesses, this was seen to be the better option, because vehicular traffic has two high-speed routes for which they can use to access either Evelyn Avenue or Sunnyvale Avenue. And that is, they can either go down Matilda to California if they're coming from the north side, or to Washington from the other direction, or they can go down Fair Oaks to in the other direction. So and that was it for the Sunnyvale Avenue one. So any other questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I don't understand any of this.
Okay, what don't you understand?
Get this. So my other question though is, I hate tunnels because I'm always afraid that people could get mugged in them. So talk to me about the safety of this tunnel and the lighting, and that there won't be like a whole bunch of people that are unhoused living in it.
Okay, so no, it will not be a dark creepy tunnel kind of thing. So if we go to the picture here of what the tunnel will look like, it is going to be something well lit like this on either side. It's not going to be like a mugging waiting to happen. And because of the volume of traffic that is going to be going underneath it in terms of both cyclists and pedestrians, I think you can think the usage of it will be prohibitive to crime, such as we have in Sunnyvale. And then this is what it would look like potentially. You can see that there would be, this is the ramp, this is the bicycle ramp accessing to go down into the tunnel, and this is the walkable pedestrian side. And then hopefully the pedestrian sidewalk area is physically separated from the bicycle area, so that would be avoiding a possible collision point. But also the section of street that it's crossing, you have to realize this is going from the giant vehicular tunnel that was going down all the way down to Washington to just from the Caltrain tracks to Evelyn. So in terms of total yardage, it's much smaller, Gail. So hopefully that eases your mind about creepy tunnels. All right, so the next one is a little harder. And this was the Mary Avenue grade separation because of issues of quorum and recusals, because of we had to have a special meeting on that, which we did. And so basically the same thing. The feasibility study started in 2017 on all this. And then you get the general idea is what Caltrain anticipates with electrification that there'll be an increase in the number of trains per day, because that's what they want to do. They want to have more trains per day and a high-speed train, which is why the all up and down the track route, they are addressing these crossing issues. And so what they had proposed, sorry. So August 30th is going to be the city council meeting with respect to these undercrossings. So as we said, it's going to be a very chunky meeting full of important things. So people, if they are interested in commenting on these things, should definitely attend the meetings. Let me see if I can zoom this up for you. Okay, so this is the underpass proposal. This is the first type of first proposal, and this is pretty much a straight underpass. And if I can show you here. So what they meant was that if they built this underpass, they would have to potentially acquire the properties on either side of the 7-Eleven, the collision repair, and the Valero station, which was very unpleasant to the local residents. They really did not want to lose their 7-Eleven store, especially since that's heavily used by the residents. And also that it makes it a little more awkward in terms of vehicular traffic, bicycle and pedestrian traffic dealing with this. But it makes it easier for vehicles in that it's more of a straightforward thing, and it also gives full access to Evelyn. But what you can't see in this is that it actually means sinking the road in both directions. Okay, so that Evelyn would have to be graded down. This is why the cost of the construction is so much higher than the other option, which you'll see upcoming. But you'll have to imagine, because like I said, they didn't have the nice visual picture showing what it actually would physically look like, is that all these would go down on Evelyn, and then Mary would also go down in order to have this underpass. And then the Caltrain tracks would be elevated over this underpass. So the road would basically be going down in both directions towards this intersection. So it's sinking the whole intersection and the approaches to them. And then what remains is the elevated Caltrain tracks. And then they did a summary to look at conflict points for the circulation pattern. So what you can see is that there's little change between not doing anything and with the build. that's proposed with the underpass in terms of conflict points. And that's kind of what it would look like. So if you can sort of imagine maybe Oregon Expressway, where it goes under for Palo Alto, it would be kind of like that. Or I think there's one in Redwood City that I'm coming on, yeah. So the other option, and it looks more awkward, I know, is Mary Avenue with the jug handle. And so what it would mean is that there wouldn't be this downgrade on Evelyn. Evelyn would remain at grade. What would happen is there would be a tunnel going down under the tracks and under Evelyn for north-south Mary Avenue. And then there would be this jug handle, which would enable vehicular traffic, bicycle traffic, pedestrian traffic to access Evelyn from the downgrade. I know it looks weird. But also that would mean that it again, you can see it costs much less. It's less of an impact in terms of the driveway reconstruction that has to go along to the residences along this area here. And it also doesn't mean you have to sink the whole street in both directions in order to accommodate it. And what would happen is that the signalized intersection that's currently at Evelyn and Mary goes away and gets moved down here to this left turning intersection where the jug handle begins. So you wouldn't need to have a signalized intersection for Evelyn, because Evelyn is just going straight through until you get to this point. So, so if you can imagine, this is a signalized intersection here. And then it talks about the change, and then it reduces the number of conflict points. And then this is the image that they show of the jug handle. You can imagine the Valero gas station still here. And then if the Valero gas station does go away, it depends on what the acquisition is. And remember, these are the early phase plans. This is not the final plan. We had brought up the suggestion of this being like a local mini park or something like that, you know, if there was a possibility. And then we talked about some of the design elements. For instance, the bicycle lanes that they had in this design were only class 2, which is the minimum standard on the ATP. So we actually, when the BPAC endorsed this, we request that they provide a final plan to the BPAC before it goes to the city council for review, and that we want to see more than the minimum ATP standards met. We want to see fully separated bicycle and pedestrian structures from the street, because class 2 doesn't cut it in terms of safety. Also, we were talking about 2-stage left turns like you see in some of San Jose for bicycles. So there's fewer conflict points between the pedestrian traffic, the bicycle traffic, and the vehicular traffic. And then the other recommendation we made, if I can go back to this picture here on the jug handle, is you'll know that Bidwell Avenue here, we actually requested that they study closing off Bidwell Avenue to vehicular traffic at this entrance, making, you know, sort of a bollard. So that would reduce a conflict point for bicycles, vehicles going down Mary towards the underpass, because it would be one less driveway to have to deal with. And that Bidwell Avenue is still accessible through Carson Drive, so that the neighborhood would not lose access to their homes. It would actually become a cul-de-sac, which might actually be more desirable to them. So let me see if there was anything else. Again, we went along with the recommendation of the underpass with the jug handle, mostly because of the cost, the disruption to the neighborhood in terms of construction, the potential linkage of this change with an Evelyn. There's supposed to be a complete bicycle pedestrian Evelyn Avenue. I guess I want to call it throughway trail that we're planning for in the future. That's in the preliminary stages along the Caltrain tracks. So there would be opportunity to link up these streets with that trail. when it comes into fruition. And that was pretty much it for Mary Avenue. So any questions about that? I know the jug handle looks weird, but it's actually a nicer option in terms of what's going on. Yeah, Tara.
It looks like that you have no access from Mary going south onto Evelyn or from Mary going north.
You do, you do. It's just that in order to get there, oops, sorry, in order to get there, if you're going south, remember the street continues here. It doesn't end here. So this is the rest of Mary in this picture.
Yeah, I
So
got
what would
that.
happen is that there would be there's a left turn lane here. And to get to Evelyn, you would have to go through 2 signalized intersections. The first one being here to make the left here, and then left again onto Evelyn.
Okay, and then coming from the north towards the south,
Right.
how is access onto Evelyn?
So again, if you're coming this way, remember Mary keeps going here. I know the picture is not very good.
No, but
Yeah.
I'm talking not going on Mary, going on to Evelyn from Mary.
Right, you would go through this intersection, you would turn right, and then you would go through this signalized intersection to go right or left onto Evelyn.
Okay, so everything goes in a loop.
Yes. So you would, if you wanted to go straight on Mary, you would just continue down this road
Yeah.
here. And if you were, so if you're coming from the south toward the north, you would go to this jug handle. If you're coming from the north to the south, you go to this jug handle to get to Evelyn.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how is access then? Is that also true for bikes and peds?
Yeah, as you can see here, the green stripe, and I know it's not a very good picture. Let me see if I can zoom it up a little more. Oops, sorry. Let me scroll it down. Whoops, sorry. And it looks misleading because it looks like the street ends here, but the street doesn't end here.
No,
at the
I'm
bottom.
not questioning that part.
yeah.
I'm questioning access.
Yeah, so if you can see the green lanes, what would happen is the cyclists would have to, again, enter the jug handle and cross this way to get to the bike lane, to get to Evelyn.
And pedestrians as well?
Pedestrians, you see the pedestrians crossing here. So there's, yes,
My goodness.
yeah.
So it's really tough for pedestrians.
It's a complex intersection
Yeah.
for both, which is why we were saying that they need to change the design layout to be a higher level of an ATP standard, because it still favors vehicular traffic over either the bicyclists or the pedestrians in terms of crossing.
Yes, it does.
Yes, and
Thank
like
you.
I said, these are all signalized intersections. So, this one here, it doesn't look like it, but this is a signalized intersection, the
Yeah.
one that's up in the upper corner. And this is also a signalized intersection. So right now, when people are crossing Mary in this block, there is no signal. They cross at the Mary Evelyn thing. And
That's
so,
right.
yeah, and they have to deal with the train as well, with the gates coming down. Yeah, Agnes.
Yeah, so in regard to the, what's being planned in Sunnyvale, in downtown Sunnyvale, I apologize if you said this. What is BPAC's preference? Is it the less expensive of the two? Or
It's the
which-
pedestrian bicyclist only intersection, similar to what Mountain View is doing at Castro.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Scott.
Yeah, thanks for explaining this. I read all the materials and frankly could not understand it until I heard your explanation. It all makes sense hearing your explanation. My question is, at the city council meeting, who's going to come opposed to these sorts of recommendations?
That's a good question. I'm not certain. There might be, the city staff and the BPAC were in alignment on this, although we weren't necessarily in alignment for the Mary Avenue in terms of the amenities to the bicyclists and pedestrians, which is why we want to see what the final project plan will actually look like. And then with respect to the Sunnyvale Avenue one, actually, I think Councilperson Hendricks is very much behind the Sunnyvale Avenue plan with the bicycle pedestrian only undercrossing, because the Downtown Business Association is so much for that option as opposed to the giant tunnel.
Yeah, if you've got the Downtown Business Association in favor of the proposal, you've got a very strong proponent.
Right. I mean, they don't like either, really. I mean, they generally would like to keep things as is, but if they, the choice between the two, they much prefer the pedestrian bicycle only option, because who wants to have a big trench separating you from your customers?
Thank you.
Gail.
Yeah, I
No
was just,
creepy tunnel here, Gail.
no, what would be really cool is
Yeah.
if someone could make this into a little video.
Yeah, I wish they had like 3D
on
modeling
both
on here.
intersections.
Yeah, when they did these presentations, I wish they would show like 3D modeling so you could actually see what it'd be
Yeah,
like
because
physically to go
I
through it.
I don't understand it at all, and I guess
Yeah.
I'm just not a 4D person.
Yeah, so option
Thanks.
one was basically syncing the intersection in both directions so that Evelyn and Mary are still at grade to each other, but that the Caltrain tracks would remain elevated above the two of them.
No, I get all that stuff. It's just
Yeah.
that I hope I'm not the only one of 15 people that doesn't see this, but it's really hard for me to visualize this. If someone could automate, make it into a little video, that would be really cool.
I will, you know what, you could always put that in, if you're going to be attending the city council meeting, you could always make that suggestion to the city, to the project planners, because I think that's a good idea. Nick, you had a question.
Yeah, so I attended the BPAC meeting and listened to Angela talk about this. One of the things that struck me is that her initial presentation is already assuming a certain type of bike interaction, which assumes that bikes want to divert from the bike lane and mingle with left turns.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but they didn't even provide enough detail there, right?
Right, and you heard me chastise her for that gently.
Right. And what we really want are protected intersections with bike signaling, where you hit the button and the signal changes instead of waiting for a full cycle. Has anybody been bringing those up?
We've actually been bringing up the NACTA standards, which are the two-stage turns for bicyclists, so they don't actually have to merge into a left lane. But what would happen is you would actually progress through this intersection. Like there are examples in downtown San Jose that are actually working right now on that. So you would, if you're coming down Mary, you would actually progress to the intersection, even if it's a red light, to here. And this is where you would wait for your left turn. And it would be a protected bike area, basically. And then you would proceed to the bike lane, so that again you would be able to wait for the left turn for Evelyn, or right turn for Evelyn. You would just make your right turn. And that the other thing is that the fact that these were grade 2 bike lanes, which is basically paint.
Green we know that's crap.
Yes, and that we wanted fully separated infrastructure. So, and then the other thing is that we felt there were too many conflict points with pedestrians also at this intersection design, and that it had to be looked at. So my thing would be like, I would want to see bulb outs here, so that the cars that want to turn right on the jug handle can't just go through the intersection and turn right, that they would have to wait, or, to protect the pedestrians, so that it would be shorter,
So do we expect that, the city's going to be offering more detailed drawings of these things even before 3D renderings? Because what they've got is kind of hand wavy. That
is a good question. And you can certainly ask the city that, I think I agree. I think the grade of the depth of design that is presented to us for review is kind of minimal. And I don't like it either. I would much rather see an actual interactive kind of presentation like Gail mentioned, where you actually get the feel of what it's like physically to go through both proposals, so you have some idea. And also that these are so preliminary design, it's like, well, you're giving us this preliminary thing, but you're not even showing us, what issues, what can be done in terms of, how it actually looks in the neighborhood kind of thing.
Right.
Gail, did you have
Yeah.
another question, or you just left your hand up? Okay. Anything else, Nick?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. I agree.
I'll be a fly in the ointment on this for a while.
Yeah, go ahead. Gad, fly away. And that was off the record. And did you have a question?
I was wondering about that gas station. You mentioned the possibility.
Valero, yeah.
Yeah, because if that's still there, how would cars get in and out of it?
Well, the driveway, they would still be able to access it from Evelyn. They just wouldn't be able to access it from Mary.
So if you're coming down Evelyn from from Mountain View,
Right.
you turn right into it. But what if
Right.
what if you're coming from downtown Sunnyvale towards?
Then you have to do the jug handle.
Okay, and then you would do a left turn into the.
There might be, again, this is such a preliminary design. I don't know how the driveway accesses would be changed for Valero, because they don't really go into that detail.
Yeah, I just would be concerned that that's yet another, driveway point of conflict between bikes and cars.
But yes,
that's
it
done.
already is. I mean, this is
Yeah.
the
Oh,
route I
that's
go
true.
down all the time, and it's never fun. Yes.
Right. Okay,
Anything
thank-
else? Mary? And sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out, there is in fact a video simulation of the jug handle layout on the city site. I think I posted the link in the chat.
Oh, it's interesting. They didn't present that to us.
Well, she mentioned it at the meeting, but she said it's too long to show.
Okay. I was unaware of that. So, and that wasn't included in the agenda, which it could have been as a link. So that's also rather disappointing.
Yeah, it's on this, there's a link on the city site, and I was just looking at it. It's kind of neat. Maybe you could show it here. I don't know.
Let's see. Let's go to the city site. Hang on a
And
second.
while you're doing that, the next step is the EIR, would be the EIR, right? After the council makes a decision.
Yes.
I'm a little concerned about the Valero station is there's going to be a lot of chemicals in the ground when they start digging. Hopefully someone has considered that, but that's
Where is it under? Is it under like meetings and agendas, or is it under?
I think I put the link in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see the chat because I'm presenting.
Really?
I don't see it there, Mike.
No. Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Uh,
Okay, now, sorry, because the chat disappears when I present. No, I don't see it. Is it because I'm presenting?
No, it's, I don't see it there either.
Did you send it to somebody by accident?
Anything's possible, I guess. Shoot, I can't. Yeah, it's under the, well, shoot.
That's weird. I have everything, up to 7:39, and then I don't have anything after that.
Okay, let me try to paste it again. Oh, yeah, I just sent it to Julia. I don't think anybody else wanted to see this.
So now we know that you're privately direct texting Julia during the meetings, huh? Okay,
There you go.
all right. Let me bring this over to my
Yeah.
other window here.
It's because she's giving me direction all the time because I get confused. So.
Okay. Oh, yes, and now the Valero's this big green square. And you notice it's from a vehicle point of view again.
It's from a helicopter view,
Yes,
not a vehicle.
yes, but I
Yeah.
meant the point of view is,
That's a drone.
yeah.
Yeah, Well, that bike lane looks completely safe, doesn't it, there? That,
Oh, yeah, the
Oh.
green paint is always so protective.
Right, how could a car possibly drive over paint? That would just be
Right, right.
impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Never mind the
that's all.
merge here, but we'll get creamed. Here's our
And,
jug handle.
but I was kind of disappointed that they did not consider that, that Evelyn mixed-use trail that they're planning. They have funding for it.
They did, but the problem is that it's a vapor trail right now.
Well, it doesn't
Until we
exist.
actually, I mean, it's,
None of this exists.
yeah,
right?
yeah, but I meant, we don't know how it will physically be laid out, so we don't know how it would hook up until it's there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Good
Yeah,
point, yeah.
so.
Good.
yeah, I
Actually,
wonder
that
if
was
they-
quite instructive.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
uh,
I wonder if they showed one for Sunnyvale Avenue Crossing Community Meeting.
So why aren't the bike lanes protected?
Because they designed it to the minimum of the ATP standards, for which I chastised them and said, we don't want to see minimum ATP standards.
Attendees are coming in.
Yes.
Yeah, there's,
Is live.
Okay, so this is this was June 9th. I don't know if they're going to show anything here. Oh, this is our BPAC meeting, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I did tell them that we don't want to see plans with any more minimum ATP standards. We want to see higher than that, because if it's not built, we're the only city in Santa Clara County right now, I think, that has no grade 1 bicycle infrastructure within the city. None.
Oh, there's a block up at Moffett Park.
yes, there is.
Okay, I take it back. There is
That was a
block-
Leadership Sunnyvale project.
Yes, right. But the reason why we get pushback on the other stuff, like buffered bike lanes with bollards and stuff, is the missing bike lane street sweeper. And so I had this fantasy that if I won the Powerball, that I was going to donate a street sweeper to the city, and they could figure out what to do with it for the bike lanes. Because I didn't want to hear that as an excuse anymore as to why we don't get that.
It is something cyclists complain about a lot in Cupertino, because if there's something in the bike lane, you're
Yeah.
stuck and
Yes.
you're gonna hit it. Or you're gonna, it's,
Yeah. And then the reason why we get from the city transportation folks is why we're not actually designing more higher grade bike infrastructure, is because we don't have a street sweeper that will fit into that bicycle infrastructure. So it becomes problematic. So I think my next study session is going to be, what is the cost of a study project is going to be, what is the cost of a bike lane street sweeper? And 3 years from now, we'll get an answer on that.
No, we need to ask for a grant. So we need to ask for
Google
a grant
would
for a special.
probably, okay, I looked this up. I went and did research. A bicycle lane street sweeper costs about $220,000. Okay, that's it for the street sweeper. Okay, that's not a lot of money. Okay, we could get grants from LinkedIn and from Google to pay for the damn thing. I know they would pay for it because they want this infrastructure. So it's like, but the problem is then the city has to have personnel to run it and time to run it, and then we'll get pushback on those costs.
So I'm just gonna say thank you, because this
Sorry,
has
you can
been
see
really
this is
good,
a rant
and we
with
could
me.
probably go all night on different bike ped
Yeah.
issues.
Yes,
Um,
it's a rant with me. I'll stop sharing. The street sweeper's a rant.
yes, yes. But thank you. I mean, that was good to hear and see it, because like Gail, it helped to hear it again, because when you read the emails and you see the stuff from Ari, you're like, what exactly?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was really hard to visualize the differences. I mean, the tunnel was just like, as soon as you saw the picture of the tunnel, it was like, eh.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I think we are good for tonight. I don't have any other announcements, except for if you have any questions for that you want to see voiced on the candidate forum, or any themes along our pillars, please submit them to us. Our website, or you guys know my email, I'll put it in the chat. But I don't think I have anything else. Anybody else?
Any opinions expressed as to bicycle street cleaning was the sole opinion of Leah Melman and not of the Sunnyvale Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission.
Yep. So I will ring my bell, and everybody have a good night and see you next month. Thank you for coming on a summer night.
Bye.